All right. Welcome back to All Cars Y'all. My name is John. It is time for another Motorweek retro review reaction. This one, 1985 Pontiac Sunbird Turbo and Convertible. There's a lot of good stuff going on with this one. And for those of you who've been here before and know that I'm not a big fan of Pontiacs, you're about to hear some surprising things, I think. Also, this brought back a lot of memories for me. Two big memories around this car. We'll get into it in a little bit, but as always, get comfy in your comfy chair, grab your beverage of choice. This is some half calf because it's the afternoon, but bonus, I'm also drinking some Gatorade today. And let's see what Motorweek said about the Sunbird Turbo when it was brand new.
Motorweek is made possible by TireRack.com, State Farm, and WeatherTech.
General Motors may be putting a lot of their future eggs in high-tech baskets like the Saturn, but they've got a few things around now that they can crow about. As it happens, GM has one of the smartest looking of the new crop of ragtops. From Pontiac, it's the Sunbird Convertible. And with its available turbocharged power, it puts a whole new meaning to the phrase of getting a fast tan.
It's easy to fall for the Sunbird Convertible's rakish looks. With the top down, it's one of the best looking of Detroit's new wave of convertibles.
Okay, I don't know where they're going to go with it exactly, so let's start with the styling here real quick. And I forgot at the beginning, I do want to thank one of my viewers who actually recommended, I believe it was the 84 Sunbird Turbo. I couldn't find that one, but I found this 85, and I thought the convertible gave us something interesting to talk about. So, styling. I love it, honestly. You know, I tend to get critical, certainly later, of Pontiac styling, but I think this looks really, really good. I don't love the three headlights at the front, but I thought the J cars were very handsome. I thought the Cavalier was good looking. I thought the Sunbird was good looking. Some of the other ones, not so much. And then as a convertible, I think it looks fantastic. It's an economy car. It's a smaller car, right? It's nothing special and fancy. It's not a Corvette or a Bentley or anything like that. It's just a fun car that gives you a little bit more sun in the process. And stylistically, I think these look really good. I do. Again, I could do without that, what looks like a third headlight. I don't know the front there, but overall, I think this is a very well-balanced, shapely car, which is to say it is a rectangle with wheels cut out for it. But that's what I like, and I honestly think these have gotten better looking. The more I look back on them, the more I like them. And I gotta say, I kind of dig those wheels too.
Like all of GM's soft-top models, the J-Bird is refitted by the American Sunroof Corporation. Their conversions are pretty thorough. The top is all-electric and goes up or down quickly. Since mid-ranged LE trim is standard, the Sunbird Convertible comes nicely appointed, with all normal J-car creature features also available. In every convertible conversion, something has to give. And here Pontiac made the prudent choice of sacrificing both some rear seat and trunk space. I wouldn't want to ride back there for very long, but it is doable. At least you still get enough luggage space for a short trip to the country, and one that will...
Oh boy, okay, so apparently that's all we're going to get here about the interior. You know, it's a shame that what was a nice little four-seat, you know, car, that's unusable space back there. And understanding that they took a car and literally chopped the top off to make it a convertible, and they had to take some trunk space and take some back seat space. It's just a shame you end up with something of this useless seat, which means that the overall body is a little long. I don't know. It almost screams to have been designed as a convertible from the get-go. So they could have either shortened it up, had a sportier, nimbler version, or taken into account the top at the beginning so that you had a little bit more usable space back there. Regardless, let's move on. Dashboard, it's ugly. It is cheap plastic everywhere, and very much that late 70s, early 80s, everything's got to be under this bin, and at least the radio's the right way, and they didn't do anything really funky here. It's, at the time, it was fine, right? It strikes me as an older dash that they just kept using, probably because they did. It's fine. It was fine at the time, but GM just was not pushing the interiors. In fact, it's where they took cost out. And even the gear shifter here, I mean, it looks like it's in a plastic shoebox. It just, I don't know. Not a lot of style here.
But it is doable. At least you still get enough luggage space for a short trip to the country, and one that will definitely be fast. Because under this Sunbird's hood lies a Brazilian-made 1.8-liter overhead cam Turbo 4 with a brute force of 150 horsepower and a like amount of torque. That's 79% more horsepower and 53% more torque than the normally aspirated motor. Turbo boost totals 9.4 pounds on high-test unleaded fuel. When we tested this same engine in Pontiac's J-Car sedan last year, we came away wildly impressed about everything except the very hard-to-control torque steer.
Okay, a couple of things there. First off, I think that's a handsome little car. And it's something I guess I've been dancing around on the channel a lot of car. I just want car, you know. Anyway, so story number one here, that engine. Back when I was probably 16-ish years old, the job I was at, one of our guys, one of our coworkers, kind of a friend of mine at the time, I don't know what he drove before, but one day he showed up and he had to have gotten a new car. He had to, whatever it was. And he got a Sunbird. Okay. Now, at the time, GM family, I was a GM guy. I was driving a Buick, and he pulls up in the Sunbird. And of course, being a little, 16-year-old who was judgmental, I'm like, look at the little car. I drive a Regal. And he's like, come drive this thing. And he'd gotten the turbo version. And man, it was a hoot. I did not know it was Brazilian made. That's very interesting. And 150 horsepower, isn't that what they got from the Quad 4 when it was introduced? Something like that, right? It was a peppy car. I'm not going to oversell it and tell you that it was any kind of huge muscle car, fire breathing. It was nothing like that. But man, was it fun to drive. It was an absolute hoot. So much so, I remember to this day how much I enjoyed that car. It partly shaped my opinion of the Sunbird. It was just wonderful to drive. It was so much fun. Of course, when you're coming from a rear-wheel drive Buick to a front-wheel drive Sunbird with a turbo that has more power than your car with a V8, it was extremely impactful to me. Now, of course, it was a Pontiac, so at one point he did come into work and his windshield wiper had come off. And I don't mean it broke down at the base. I mean up where the wiper attaches, it broke off. And so he had the choice of either driving, not being able to see because of the rain, or literally scraping a groove into his windshield. I remember that too, but it was red and it was a freaking blast. I want to say it had a gray interior, but I don't really remember. So I've had a positive opinion of the Sunbird for darn near 40 years now.
Our 4-speed manual convertible, a little over 50 pounds heavier than the sedan, didn't do that quite as much, yet it still delivered fairly fast acceleration. 0 to 60 takes 10 seconds as the port-injected motor revs quickly to its 6,500 RPM red line. We obviously feel that the Sunbird badly needs a fifth gear. but the present four-gear manual cable linkage has been revised for smoother work. A quarter mile took 16.8 seconds, quite fast again, with a terminal speed of 80. But both these times were slightly slower than our test of the Sunbird Turbo Sedan, which had an automatic transaxle, allowing uninterrupted turbo boost.
Okay, GM, get real. I mean, you came out with the Fiero and you saddled it with a 4-speed, and now you've got a 4-speed manual in this. This is what I'm talking about. GM just, sometimes they came out with something and they were awfully close to being really, 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 really good. And then it's like, why? Why did you do this? You know, was it cost cutting? Did they just not have one? Couldn't they have bought one from somebody else, and instead they saddle the consumer with a 4-speed? Kind of makes me mad, honestly. But as they say, the torque steer is tamed with an automatic. Where's the fun in that, right? But did you see that 0 to 60 time of 10? That sounds a little slow to me. Again, I'm not going to pretend the one I drove was any kind of race car, but it felt just kind of seat of the pants. I remember it feeling so much peppier than that. Of course, it could be my Buick took 15 or 16 seconds, and that's the difference I'm feeling. But when they were doing this acceleration run right here, when he shifted gears, did you see the whole car squirm underneath him? Interesting. It felt quicker than that, I thought.
Added weight and wind resistance of the convertible count too. But the passing time from 40 to 55 in third gear, a brief 3.7 seconds, is the same highly acclaimed time as in the sedan, probably because maximum torque comes in at only 2,800 RPM, right in the normal cruising range. All Sunbird turbos come with Pontiac's WS6 Sport suspension package that includes larger front and rear stabilizer bars, substantially stiffer springs, and 60 series Eagle GT tires. We found less tendency for the torque steer to pull this Sunbird towards the right than on last year's Turbo J sedan. Steering is still precise, but dead in feel, and Pontiac should make the steering a lot heavier to prevent too much driver input in emergency situations. On the other hand, you can control the car's attitude with the throttle. Lift your foot slightly and the lightly loaded rear end will come around and cut the turn tighter than you'd expect. While we found the Sunbird Turbo Convertible to be a much better handling car than former J bodies, it also exhibited much less chassis flex than most other convertibles. That's a common ailment of unibody cars that have lost their solid roofs. And considering that this particular test car had really been put through the mill before it fell into our hands, that's a very good sign.
Very, very interesting. GM giveth and GM taketh away. They end up with something that is engineered well, probably because ASC had something to do with it, and doesn't exhibit the flex you would expect, but the steering's dead. But then they criticize it for, basically driver error if you're overcorrecting. But it also, and there was a lot of body roll there. So not super, super sporty. And I have to say, this car looks like it's on its tippy toes. Just, I don't know, that ground clearance right there just seems oddly high. But then when they're going around the racetrack, they say if you lift off on the throttle, the rear end will come around and tighten. Good. I don't know. This is really mixed to me of it's good and shows some tuning, right? I guess that's what I'm trying to say. It shows some tuning, but a lot of the body roll and other things and the steering feels like GM didn't take it that next step of sweating the details. Really interesting.
The brakes have been glazed by one too many panic stops, so the behavior of this car's disc drum system wasn't quite up to last year's Sunbird Turbo sedan. Stops from 55 took an average of 145 feet, just short of what we call long, and 20% over the sedan's performance. On the other hand, despite some premature lockup of the right front wheel, halts were straight with a secure pedal feeling.
Okay, I got to jump in there. Yes, the braking, that sounds long, but they gave a great disclaimer before it that that's some kind of press car. It's been run through the ringer, and the brakes were glazed, and they tested a sedan earlier, and this was 20% longer. Well, make it 20% shorter, and all of a sudden you have a thoroughly fine stopping distance with absolutely no drama. A little lockup, but it was straight without ABS. Yes, it's long a little bit, but you can forgive it because new brakes would fix that. No problems there. Gosh, I think that's a good looking car.
Another aspect of the Sunbird convertible we liked even better was its civilized highway manners. At legal speeds, the ride is firm, not harsh, with little top buffeting or wind noise. A sound level of 73 decibels at 55 is about what you should expect from a well-made convertible. And here's one case where the lowered government fuel economy ratings for the manual of 22 in the city and 27 on the highway pale beside our real-world test. We managed 30 on our 100-mile urban loop. That's 5 miles per gallon more than we found in the automatic turbo sedan. Another part of daydreaming about the Pontiac Sunbird convertible is that it is affordable. List for the non-turbo car begins at $12,300, with our turbo packaged ragtop costing near $15,500. Not cheap, we agree, but well within the middle range of the current crop of smallish convertibles that generally offer far less in performance. In fact, the well-built Sunbird Turbo conversion seems better made than some ragtops costing twice as much. Even if it still professes some compromises in handling, it is comfortable and very spirited. And our car was good on gas, too. Throw in artistic looks, and we leisurely conclude that the Pontiac Sunbird Turbo Convertible is a pretty skillful, fun-in-the-sunshine dream come true.
Oh, good. What, again, kind of mixed there at the end, saying it was extremely well built, more than cars that cost twice as much. Those prices do kind of surprise me, though, for $85. Just checking there, because granted these are turbo and everything else, but in 95 I think I bought a Neon for 14 or something like that. I just, the prices seem a little weird there to me, but I want this to be a positive one because I like this car and I like how it looks. In spite of my criticism of Pontiac, I like this car specifically. And that seems a little, and I like the fact, if you've watched some of my other videos in the past months, where's not only cars, but where's kind of a fun car that's not expensive and a convertible. I actually talked about the Sebring before. And this kind of fits in the same idea of it's not expensive and it's fun. Yes, please. But the other part of the memory, I said this car brought up memories for me. And the first was about the coworker that bought one and what a hoot it was to drive. But the other one was when I was getting ready to get my driver's license and I took driver's ed. Remember, we had a 79 Oldsmobile station wagon, and then I drove a 76 Buick. And our driver's ed car was a Chevy Cavalier. I don't remember what year it was exactly, but it was relatively new. So it was probably an 84 or something along those lines. And I loved it. You know, coming out of these big, heavy Buicks with big V8s and super, super thin steering wheels, getting into a Cavalier at the time felt like a spaceship compared to my cars, our cars. I absolutely loved driving the Cavalier. Now, to paint the picture, we were pro-American, we were pro-GM, and at the time I was a little SHIT, so I would criticize people who bought Japanese cars. I didn't want anything to do with Toyota or Honda. And the Cavalier, I loved it. I loved how it felt, I love how it drove, I love how it rode, and I'll never forget how big and thick and chunky that steering wheel was. It made an impact. So back when I was first learning to drive or first had my driver's license, there were two J cars that came out, that came along into my life and formed my opinion of the Cavalier, of the J platform. And well, the fact is that that platform went on to be one of the best-selling platforms in the world. And I still have a positive opinion of them. Now, I could be super, super nitpicky, and you know it. You know, the panel gaps and the plastic inside and ugly interiors and on and on and on. And I know if I went back and drove a 85 Accord and an 85 Cavalier, that the Accord, certainly back then, would feel like the better, more expensive car. I know it. But I've always had a positive impression of these generations of Cavalier. And let's not forget that at the end of the 90s, I believe it was, I bought a used Cavalier. And that generation, was well reviewed by pretty much everybody as being pretty equivalent to a Honda Civic. Now, after owning one for a little while, I completely disagree. And in fact, that last one not only pretty much ruined my opinion of Cavaliers, but it pretty much kept me away from American cars ever since. So, didn't have a happy ending to the story. But for the 85 Turbo, what a hoot. And I am curious if any of you know more about this engine. I might go look it up. From Brazil, I get the impression, first off, I don't know anything about where it came from or what happened to it, or if it was particularly good and strong and reliable. But it seems to me, you don't ever hear about that engine very much. Like, it came and it went really, really quickly. Feels like a blip there in the 80s. If you know anything about it, let us know in the comments, but I might do some research on it as well. But I appreciate you being here. I hope you enjoyed this one, opened my soul to you a little bit there, and I am ready for the criticism of anybody who's like, you like a J car? Thanks for being here, y'all.